She looked him straight in the eye, her voice cold and sharp as glass, and said the words every father fears. "Daniel, you're fired." In that moment, this single dad felt the world tilt under his feet. Rent, school fees, his daughter's insulin. All of it flashed through his mind in a single heartbeat. He could have begged. He could have broken down. He could have cursed the billionaire woman sitting across from him. But instead, he said something else. Something that would change both of their lives forever. And here's the real twist. She wasn't just firing him. She was testing him. To understand how a billionaire ended up testing a single dad like that, we need to rewind. Because this story didn't start in that glass office on the 40th floor. It started in a tiny two-room apartment, with the sound of a little girl coughing in the dark. But before we go, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notification for more interesting stories like this. Daniel Ortega was not the kind of man rich people usually noticed. He woke up before the sun, in a cramped apartment at the edge of the city that always smelled faintly of bleach and fried onions. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a map of Africa, and the window overlooked the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store. But for Daniel, that place was home. On his mattress, pushed against the peeling wall, his 8-year-old daughter, Mia, lay curled up, tangled in a faded unicorn blanket. She was small for her age, with huge brown eyes and a quiet way of watching the world like she was always listening for something deeper. "Dad," she whispered that morning, as his alarm buzzed at 4:45 a.m. Daniel turned it off quickly so it wouldn't wake the neighbors. "Yeah, baby. I'm here," he whispered back. "Do you have the early shift?" He smiled, even though his eyes were tired. "I always have the early shift," he said. "But I'll be back in time to make you late for school like always." She giggled, then coughed. That soft, dry cough that always made his chest tighten. Because Mia wasn't just any kid. She was diabetic. And that meant insulin, regular checkups, special food. Money, in other words. Money Daniel did not really have. He moved quietly around the room, careful not to step on the loose tile that clacked loudly, pulled on his uniform, a navy blazer with the silver logo of the Colton Group embroidered on the chest. Underneath, his shirt was ironed but fraying at the collar. The Colton Group. To most people, that name meant luxury hotels, skyscrapers with rooftop pools, glossy magazines, and Forbes' top 50 richest women in the world. To Daniel, it meant he could buy his daughter's insulin. It meant he could promise her that no matter how hard life got, she would never go hungry. He worked as a senior concierge and floor supervisor at the Colton Grand Hotel, a flagship property owned by one woman, Vanessa Cole, the billionaire lady. Now, let's talk about her for a second. If Daniel's world was small and crowded, Vanessa's world was the opposite. Private jets, glass towers, driver waiting by the curb. You know the type of person whose name appears in headlines more than in conversations. That was Vanessa. Self-made billionaire. The magazines called her cold. Some of her employees whispered behind her back. She was always in a sharp suit, usually white or black, with her hair swept back into a sleek bun, as if every strand knew better than to be out of place. Her face was beautiful but serious, the kind of face that made people sit up straighter when she walked into a room. Vanessa believed in numbers, not stories. Profit margins, shareholder reports, growth projections, feelings. Those were for Orpheus, if you had any. So how did these two people, the billionaire and the single dad, end up in a moment where she said, "You're fired"? And he answered with something that changed everything. We're getting there. On most days, Daniel's life followed a strict loop. He'd get to the hotel before dawn, nod at security, and push his way through the heavy staff entrance door. Inside, the world changed instantly. Polished marble floors, soft music, the faint smell of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. He had a routine. Check the lobby. Review staff assignments. Make sure the VIP suites had everything they needed. Smile. Always smile. Because guests at the Colton Grand weren't just guests. They were people who could change your life with a single tip, or ruin your job with a single complaint. "Morning, boss," Marco called out one Tuesday morning, jogging up beside him. Marco was a bellhop, 23, always grinning, always talking about some get-rich-quick idea. "Morning," Daniel replied, taking the clipboard from the reception desk. You on VIP arrivals today. Try not to argue with anyone about crypto again. That was once, Marco protested. And he started it. Sure he did, Daniel said, but he was smiling. This was his world. A world of rules and standards, where your worth was measured in online reviews and secret shopper reports. And if there was one rule Daniel took more seriously than any other, it was this. You don't lie. Not to guests. Not to your staff. Not to yourself. That rule came from somewhere. From someone. From Emily. Emily had been Daniel's wife. She died when Mia was 4. Complications during a surgery they thought was going to fix everything. One day they were planning a family trip to the beach. The next, Daniel was standing in a hospital corridor holding a plastic bag that contained her wedding ring and the clothes she'd been wearing. On the night before her surgery, she had taken his hand and said, "If anything happens, promise me you'll raise her honest. Not rich, not fancy, just honest. Promise me she'll know her father is a good man." He promised. And some promises, they don't let you go. So when Daniel came to work at the Colton Grand, he made a decision. He would do whatever he had to do to take care of Mia. But he would not become one of those people who lied, cheated, or stepped on others just to climb higher. He stuck to that, even when it hurt. And it would hurt. The first sign of trouble came on a day that looked perfectly normal. You know those days where everything feels a little too calm, and you don't know why you're uneasy yet, but your body knows before your mind does. That was this day. The lobby was quiet after the morning rush. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, turning the marble floor into a mirror. A soft piano track played from hidden speakers. Daniel stood at the front desk, checking the schedule, when he heard a voice behind him. "Daniel." He turned and saw her. Not Vanessa. Not yet. But close. This was Olivia Trent, head of operations. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks when she walked. She looked at him over the rim of her glasses. "We need you in the Sapphire Lounge," she said. "Now." His stomach dipped. "Is there a guest complaint?" "Just go," she replied. "He's waiting." Mr. Locke. That name, Daniel knew. Everyone did. Andrew Locke, Chief Financial Officer of the Colton Group, the man who controlled the flow of the company's money. And if money was blood, he was basically the heart. Daniel wiped his palms on his blazer. "Okay," he said. "On my way." The Sapphire Lounge was on the 12th floor, reserved for premium guests and executive meetings. When Daniel stepped inside, it was empty except for one man sitting at a corner table with a laptop. Slick back hair, perfectly tailored suit, cufflinks that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. "Mr. Locke." Daniel approached politely. Andrew looked up and smiled the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Daniel, sit." Daniel sat, heart thumping. "I've been reviewing some numbers," Andrew said, tapping a few keys. "Specifically, our guest compensation logs. Room upgrades. Complimentary services. You handle those approvals when you're supervising, correct?" "Yes, sir," Daniel replied. "Within the hotel policy." Andrew turned the laptop so Daniel could see the screen. Rows of data. Names. Dates. Reasons. "You comped 3 nights last month for a family whose room had a faulty AC unit," Andrew said. "You gave them free breakfast, too. Twice." "Yes, sir," Daniel said. He remembered their family. The youngest kid had asthma, and the heat had made him wheeze. "That cost us nearly $800, Andrew said flatly. "Do you think that was necessary?" Daniel swallowed. "I followed protocol. The guest had documented complaints, and the maintenance team confirmed the AC issue. They were here for a birthday trip. The child had breathing problems." Andrew's smile got thinner. "Daniel, we're not running a charity. We're running a business." "I understand, sir," he replied carefully. "But a good review is also an investment." They left very happy. They said they'd return. "We don't have proof they will," Andrew countered. "We only have proof of what we lost." He leaned forward. "Corporate is looking at reducing unnecessary generosity. We're tightening. You understand?" Daniel felt something in his chest tighten, too. "Yes, sir." Andrew closed the laptop. "Good. I'm implementing a new approval structure. From now on, any complimentary stay longer than one night must be justified in writing. And, he paused, I'd like you to adjust some of the previous entries. Adjust. Daniel repeated. Make them cleaner. Less costly on paper, Andrew said. You can reclassify some of these comps as marketing incentives so they don't hit the guest services budget so hard. Daniel's brain clicked through the implications. That would change the reason codes, he said slowly. It wouldn't be accurate. Andrew shrugged. It would be efficient. And that's what shareholders like. Accurate stories are for bedtime. Efficient numbers are for business. There it was. The first real test. Not the last. Daniel hesitated. I'm not comfortable changing records after the fact, he said finally. Andrew's eyes cooled. Uncomfortable, he repeated. That's an interesting word to use about following your CFO's direction. I'll document things differently going forward, Daniel offered. But I won't rewrite what already happened. Andrew's smile disappeared. The air between them felt heavier. I see, Andrew said slowly. Well, I appreciate your honesty. He said the word like a flaw. Daniel stood up carefully. Is there anything else, sir? No, Andrew said. That will be all. But as Daniel walked out of the lounge, he felt it in his bones. That wasn't the end. That was the beginning. From that day on, little things started to shift. Nothing anyone could point to directly at first. But you know when someone in power doesn't like you? You feel it in the way the room changes when they walk in. Schedules started to move around. Daniel was assigned more night shifts, fewer premium guests. Opportunities for overtime slipped away. One evening, while he was going over staff rotations, Marco leaned on the desk. You okay, boss? You look like someone told you the coffee machine's broken forever. Daniel forced a smile. I'm fine, he said. Just tired. Yeah, well, Marco said. Word is Mr. Locke has been in a mood. They say he's under pressure from upstairs. They're talking about restructuring. That word, restructuring, it looked harmless on paper. But in real life, it meant layoffs. It meant families packing up their lives in cardboard boxes. Daniel went home that night with his mind buzzing. When he walked into the apartment, Mia was at the small kitchen table, coloring. Hey, Daddy, she said. Look, I drew the hotel. He put his bag down and walked over. On the paper, she had drawn a tall crooked building with little square windows and a stick figure waving from the door. A big heart hovered above it. That's me, she said, pointing at the stick figure. Waiting for you. His throat tightened. It's perfect, he said softly. Just like you. He kissed the top of her head, and busied himself making dinner so she wouldn't see the worry in his eyes. Because here's the thing about being a single parent. You don't have the luxury of collapsing in front of your child. You learn to carry your fear in silence. Over the next few weeks, there were more signs. Daniel noticed housekeeping was suddenly understaffed on certain floors, but requests for more staff were under review. Deliveries were delayed, but finance refused to release emergency funds. And yet, somehow, the company kept announcing new expansion projects on the news. One new Colton Tower coming to Dubai. Record-breaking quarterly profits. On the outside, everything looked perfect. On the inside, the people at the bottom felt the cracks first. One night, after a 14-hour shift, Daniel stayed late completing incident reports. The lobby was nearly empty, just the soft vacuum hum of housekeeping in the corner. That was when he heard it. Two voices. In the partially open door of one of the meeting rooms. He recognized one instantly, Andrew Locke. The other was lower, calm, precise. Vanessa. He shouldn't have heard it. He wasn't supposed to. But life doesn't always follow the rules. He couldn't see them, but their words slipped through the gap in the door. We need to keep the board off our backs, Andrew was saying. The compensation figures make the hotel look bloated. Bloated. Vanessa replied. The Colton Grand is our flagship. We built our brand on service. Yes, but service doesn't impress Wall Street, Andrew said. Margins do. We can't keep giving things away. And frankly, some of the staff are overly generous. Staff like who? There was a pause. Your concierge supervisor, Daniel Ortega. Daniel froze. He could feel his own heartbeat in his ears. His name comes up often in the reports, Andrew continued. He comps too much. He questions instructions. I believe he even refused to adjust the logs when I asked. What do you mean he refused? Vanessa asked slowly. He said he was uncomfortable, Andrew replied, a hint of mockery in his voice, with the direction from his CFO. Another pause. That's insubordination, Andrew added. And a liability. Vanessa's voice dropped. I don't keep liabilities. Draft a list of underperformers and those who don't align with our efficiency goals. I already have one, Andrew said. I'll add his name to the top. Daniel stepped back, heart racing, almost knocking into a cleaning cart. He didn't hear the rest. He didn't need to. His name was on a list, not of promotions, of people to be cut. Just like that, because he had tried to be honest. That night, Daniel barely slept. He lay awake, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, listening to Mia's soft breathing. He turned Andrew's words over in his mind like sharp stones. Liability. Underperformer. He thought about Emily's face, her hand gripping his as she whispered, "Raise her honest." And here's where the internal war began. Because maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you've been there, caught between your values and your survival. One voice in his head said, just do what they say. Change the records. It's just numbers. Everyone does worse things to keep their jobs. The other voice whispered, if you start lying now, where does it stop? He got up quietly and went to the small kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. His reflection in the dark window looked older than his 34 years. What am I supposed to do? He muttered. He thought about finding another job, but who was hiring a hotel concierge supervisor with no degree? And even if someone was, could he risk weeks or months of unemployment? Mia needed her medication. Rent was due in 10 days. Fear tightened around his chest. And yet, somewhere under all that fear, a stubborn, quiet belief remained. If he started bending the truth just to keep a job, he would eventually become the kind of man he never wanted his daughter to see. And that, to him, was a different kind of poverty. Meanwhile, in a penthouse not too far away, a different kind of war was happening. Vanessa sat at her long-glass dining table, laptop open, headset on. The city's lights glowed beneath her like a circuit board. Andrew, the board wants cleaner numbers. Yes, she was saying. But not at the cost of our brand. On her screen, Andrew's face appeared in a small video window. I'm not suggesting fraud, he said smoothly. Just optimization. We can't let soft-hearted employees give away the profits we need. Soft-hearted employees are part of why we have loyal guests, she snapped. I built this company on stories, not just spreadsheets. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. A memory. Long before she was billionaire CEO Vanessa Cole, she had been Vanessa, the teen whose mother cleaned hotels at night. She remembered waiting in the lobby of a cheap motel, doing homework under fluorescent lights while her mother scrubbed bathrooms upstairs. She remembered a manager who yelled. She remembered guests who never said thank you. And she remembered one concierge who had bent the rules once to bring a hot meal to a little girl waiting alone in the lobby. That girl had been her. Service had saved her childhood. That's why she'd built her empire differently. But lately, all she heard in her ear was margins. Shareholders. Cut. She had started to doubt herself, to wonder if kindness really had a place in big business. Send me the list, she said finally. I'll review it. Andrew smiled. Of course. He clicked off. She stared at the screen, at the document that popped up. Names, departments, targets. At the top, highlighted. Daniel Ortega, concierge supervisor, non-compliant with new directives. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Insubordinate, Andrew had said. Too generous. She closed the laptop, but his name lingered in her mind. Who was this man, exactly? And why did something about this whole situation not sit right? Here's where the story could have gone differently. Vanessa could have trusted Andrew blindly. She could have signed off on the list, sent HR an email, and gone to sleep. People would have been fired quietly. Daniel's name would have been just one among many. But that's not what happened. Because somewhere inside Vanessa, there was still that girl sitting in a hotel lobby, watching how staff were treated. And if there's one thing she hated, it was being lied to. So she decided to find out the truth herself. She decided to test him. A week later, Daniel got the email. Mandatory meeting, 40th floor, office of CEO, 3 p.m. His stomach dropped. Regular staff never got called to the 40th floor, much less to the CEO's office. He showed the email to Olivia. She raised her eyebrows. Well, either you're getting promoted, or you're in trouble, she said. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Yeah, great. At 2:55 p.m., Daniel stood in front of the mirrored elevator doors, straightening his tie. He'd ironed his blazer twice that morning. 40, he told the elevator. As the numbers climbed, his pulse climbed with them. When the doors opened, he stepped into a different universe. This floor didn't look like a hotel. It looked like the inside of a high-end design magazine. White walls, art pieces that probably cost more than an entire year of his salary, floor-to-ceiling windows with a jaw-dropping view of the city. A receptionist with a headset and a perfectly curated smile stood up. Mr. Ortega. Yes, he said. I got an email asking me to. She's expecting you, the receptionist said. Down the hall. Last door on the left. He walked down the corridor, each step echoing. His heart thudded in his ears. At the last door, he paused, took a breath, knocked. Come in, a voice called. He opened the door, and there she was, Vanessa Cole, the billionaire lady herself, standing by the window, looking out over the city. Up close, she was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, calm eyes, a presence that filled the room without her having to say a word. Mr. Ortega, she said, turning toward him. Please, sit. He sat in the chair opposite her desk, trying not to stare. Do you know why you're here? She asked. No, he said honestly. She nodded slowly and sat down. I've been reviewing our internal reports, she began. Your name came up. His hands clenched slightly on his knees. I see, he said quietly. I'm told you've been resistant to certain directives, she continued. That you've been overly generous with guests. That you refused an instruction from our CFO. She watched his face carefully as she spoke, noting every flicker of emotion. Daniel forced himself to meet her eyes. I followed the company policy, he said, and I followed my conscience. If that's a problem, then, yes, I suppose I was resistant. Vanessa tilted her head. Why? Because changing records after the fact is wrong, he said simply. If we made a decision, we own it. If we gave something to a family who needed it, we stand by it. We don't rewrite the story just to make the numbers look better. He didn't sound defiant. He sounded tired, but there was steel under the fatigue. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, studying him. Do you know how much pressure I'm under to deliver results? She asked. I can imagine, he said. But pressure doesn't turn wrong into right. It just reveals what we're willing to sacrifice. Her eyebrows rose slightly. You have a family, Mr. Ortega. He swallowed. Yes, my daughter. She's 8. Just her. My wife passed away, he said quietly. It's just the two of us now. Something flickered again behind Vanessa's eyes, but her voice stayed cool. And you're willing to risk your job, with a child depending on you, over a few lines in a spreadsheet. Silence stretched between them. And here's the moment that would define everything. He could lie. He could say, no, you're right. I'll do whatever you want. He could beg. Instead, he took a slow breath. My daughter needs a roof over her head, he said slowly. She needs food, medicine, school. I'm her only parent. So believe me when I say, I think about this every day. He paused. But when my wife died, she asked me for one thing. She asked me to raise our daughter to know that her father is a good man, not a rich man, not an important man, just a good one. He looked down at his hands. If I teach my daughter that will lie whenever it's convenient, then what do I have left to give her, even if I keep this job? What kind of man will she think I am? He lifted his eyes to Vanessa's again. So if you're asking whether I'll change those records, the answer is no. Even if it costs me everything. Vanessa's face didn't move. But inside, something in her shifted. Because for a moment, she didn't see a staff member sitting in front of her. She saw her mother, exhausted after a night shift. She saw herself, a little girl doing homework in a lobby. She saw every person who had ever been punished for trying to do the right thing in a system that only valued profit. She could have ended it right there. She could have said, "Fine, you're fired," and meant it. But she didn't. Instead, she decided to test him further. Not just his honesty, his heart. She folded her hands on the desk and spoke the words that would send a spear of ice through his chest. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Ortega," she said calmly. "Unfortunately, we've decided to terminate your employment with the Colton Group, effective immediately." There it was. No warning. No maybe. Just, "You're fired." He stopped breathing for a second. It was like the floor dropped away beneath him. "In accordance with policy," she continued, "you'll receive 2 weeks of severance pay. HR will provide the paperwork." Her voice was smooth, detached. The voice of a woman who had delivered bad news 1,000 times before. Daniel's mind exploded into chaos. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of money. Then what? Rent. Food. Insulin. Mia. He saw her in his mind, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing another crooked hotel with a heart over it. He could feel something hot rising in his chest. Fear. Anger. Desperation. And here, my friend, is the point in most stories where people break, where they say, "Please, I'll do anything." Where they agree to whatever the powerful person wants, just to survive. Vanessa watched him carefully. She wanted to see that. She expected to see that. Would he beg? Would he retract his principles if she dangled his job back in front of him as a reward? That was her test. But what Daniel said next was not what she expected. He sat there for a moment, absorbing the blow. His voice, when it came, was rough but steady. "May I ask why?" he said. "Restructuring," she replied smoothly, "and a lack of alignment with our evolving priorities." He almost laughed, a broken sound. "So you're firing me, because I wouldn't lie." "I'm releasing you," she corrected, "because you don't fit the direction we're taking." He nodded slowly. Then he did something that surprised even him. He leaned forward slightly, meeting her eyes firmly. "With respect," he said quietly, "if your direction doesn't have room for honesty, then maybe I don't fit. But I think one day, you'll wish you kept people like me around." Her eyebrows shot up. "Is that a threat?" "No," he said quickly. "Just a truth. The kind my wife believed in. The kind I want my daughter to grow up believing in." He swallowed. "And since I'm apparently already out of a job, I might as well say this. I used to admire this company. I still do, in some ways. We do good work. We provide good service. But if we start hiding the cost of that service, if we start punishing people for putting guests and employees first instead of profits." He hesitated, then finished softly. "Then we're not the company we say we are in all your interviews." The words hung in the air between them. He thought she would explode. He thought security might walk him out. Instead, Vanessa just stared at him. Really stared, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "Anything else you'd like to say, Mr. Ortega?" she asked, voice still controlled. He thought of Mia. He thought of Emily. "Yes," he said finally. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I didn't change the records like Mr. Locke asked," he said. "But I did document the conversation. I kept emails. I kept the original logs." He slid the paper across the desk. "It's a summary of the discrepancies I've noticed. Not to save myself. Clearly, that didn't work. But to save you. Because if this goes wrong, they won't blame the CFO. They'll blame your name on the building." Her eyes flicked to the paper, then back to him. "You're giving this to me?" she asked, surprised. "Not to HR. Not to a lawyer. Not to the press." "I'm giving it to the person whose name is on my daughter's drawings," he said. "The person she thinks is some kind of hotel superhero because she sees your logo everywhere and not your flaws. I'm giving it to you because I want to believe you're better than the numbers your CFO is obsessed with. He stood up slowly. I don't have much. Just my integrity. And that's what I'm leaving with today. I hope you do something with that report. For your sake. For everyone's. He paused, then added, and if you don't, I'll still be able to look my daughter in the eye. He turned toward the door. Wait, Vanessa said. He stopped, hand on the handle, but didn't turn around. Yes. She stared at his back, at the way his shoulders were squared even in defeat. Her test had been simple in her mind when she'd planned this. See if he would beg. See if he would fold. See if he would throw his integrity away if she dangled his job like a carrot. Instead, he had handed her something she didn't expect. A mirror. And in that mirror, she saw herself. Not the billionaire. The girl in the lobby. You're a single father, she said slowly. You understand what losing this job means for your daughter, and you still chose to stand your ground. He turned to face her again. Yes, he said simply, because one day, when she's grown, I'd rather tell her we went through a hard time than tell her I became someone I'm ashamed of. Silence. Slowly, Vanessa stood up. The test was over, and he had passed in a way she had never anticipated. She walked around the desk and came to stand in front of him. Up close, he could see the faint lines around her eyes, the mark of long nights and constant decisions. Sit back down, Mr. Ortega, she said quietly. He frowned, confused. I don't. Sit, she repeated. He sat today. She went back to her desk, picked up the paper he'd given her, and read it carefully. As her eyes moved down the page, her jaw tightened. Did anyone else see this? She asked. No, he said. Not yet. Do you have copies? Yes. At home. She nodded slowly. Then she did something he absolutely did not expect. She sighed. Not the controlled, careful exhale of a CEO. A tired, human sigh. Mr. Ortega, she said. Everything I just told you about being fired. She looked him straight in the eye. Was a test. He blinked. A test. Yes, she said. I needed to know what kind of man you are when everything is on the line. Whether you'd grovel. Whether you'd lie. Whether you try to bargain with your principles. She placed the paper on the desk. I've been hearing conflicting stories about you. Mr. Locke says you're a liability. A problem. Too soft. Too honest. But our guest feedback. It calls you the soul of the hotel. He stared at her, stunned. So, I'm not fired. She shook her head. No, you're not fired. A choked sound escaped him. His lungs flooded with air so suddenly he almost felt dizzy. But, she continued, what you just said to me, that's the kind of honesty I want sitting at my table. Not hiding in the lobby. His brow furrowed. I don't understand. Good, she said. That means you're still honest enough to admit when you're confused. She sat down again, folding her hands. Mr. Ortega. Daniel, how would you like to help me fix my company? Now, let's pause here for a second. Because this is the point in the movie where the music changes. Where the camera angle shifts from defeated man walking away to unexpected second chance. What he didn't know was that Vanessa had been battling her own demons. She had started her empire on stories of kindness and service, but somewhere along the way, the numbers people had gotten louder. The investors had gotten pushy. She'd begun to wonder if maybe she was naive. If maybe she had to become cold to survive at that level. So she had tested people. Quietly. She'd tested loyalty. Obedience. Faith. But today, for the first time in a long time, she tested something else. She tested integrity. And he'd given her a result she couldn't ignore. Fix your company. Daniel repeated slowly. Yes, she said. You said something a few minutes ago. That if we start punishing people for putting guests and employees first, we're not the company we say we are. She tapped the paper he'd given her. You're right. Then fire him, Daniel said quietly. Fire Mr. Locke. Her lips twitched. You don't hold back, do you? You said you wanted honesty, he replied. I do, she said. But I also need proof strong enough to stand in front of a board of directors who care more about quarterly returns than my childhood memories. She looked at him thoughtfully. How would you feel about gathering that proof. Me? Yes, you, she said. You know the staff. You know the guests. You see things we don't see from this floor. If there's a pattern of financial manipulation, wrongful pressure, unethical directives, I need someone who can bring me the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. He hesitated. That sounds dangerous, he admitted. It is, she said. For both of us. If I'm wrong about you, you could sell me out. If you're wrong about me, I could destroy your life. So before we go any further, you need to decide something. Do you trust me enough to work with me? Not for me. With me. He thought about Emily's request. He thought about Mia's drawings. He thought about the staff downstairs who didn't even know their names were on a list. I don't know if I trust you, he said honestly. Not yet. But I trust what's right. And if what you're saying is real, that you actually want to fix this, then I'm willing to try. She nodded once. That's good enough, she said. Why me? He asked softly. I'm just a concierge. No, she corrected. You're a single father who chose truth over survival in front of someone who could ruin you. That makes you the most valuable type of person I can have near me right now. She turned her computer screen toward him, showing him a dashboard of internal metrics, complaints, and financial summaries. We're going to start with this, she said. You'll have temporary clearance to review logs, talk to staff, cross-check records. Quietly, you report directly to me. No one else. What about my job downstairs? He asked. We'll call this a special assignment, she replied. You'll still supervise, but your main role for the next few weeks will be this. Investigation. He exhaled slowly. If Mr. Locke finds out, he'll come for me. I know, she said. That's why we'll be careful, and why I need you to be brave. He gave a small, humorless laugh. I'm scared out of my mind, he admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear, she said quietly. It's acting in spite of it. He looked at her, surprised by the unexpected wisdom in her tone. Do we have a deal, Mr. Ortega? She asked, extending her hand. He stared at it, at the hand of the woman who, 5 minutes ago, had told him he was fired, at the hand of the woman who now was asking him to help her change everything. Slowly, he reached out and shook it. Yes, he said. We have a deal. The next few weeks were a blur of secrets, spreadsheets, and late nights. By day, Daniel still greeted guests, managed staff, and made sure the lobby ran like a well-oiled machine. By night, he pored over records, complimentary stays, overtime requests, vendor invoices, expense reports. The more he dug, the more he saw it. A pattern. Discounts reclassified as marketing. Refunds shuffled into vague categories. Unusual bonus payouts attached to cost-saving measures that looked noble on paper, but translated to real humans losing hours, losing benefits, losing stability. He started talking quietly to staff he trusted. Housekeepers who were told they couldn't log extra minutes even if a guest trashed a room. Kitchen staff who were asked to relabel leftover food, to make it fresh again the next day. Front desk agents who were pressured to avoid logging certain complaints. What happens if we do log them? One receptionist whispered. We get called difficult, another said. Or we don't get our shifts approved. Daniel wrote everything down. At home, after Mia was asleep, he spread papers across the small kitchen table. What are you working on, Dad? She asked one night, rubbing her eyes. He smiled and gently steered her back to bed. Just trying to make things better at work, he said. For the guests, she asked. For everyone, he said. In those moments, staring at columns of numbers and scribbled interviews, he felt the weight of what he was doing. He wasn't just collecting data. He was holding people's lives in his hands. If he failed, he could be fired for real, blacklisted from the industry. If he succeeded, powerful people could fall. Somewhere in the middle of that storm, Vanessa was fighting her own internal battles. Late at night in her penthouse office, she opened the confidential email folder labeled "From Daniel." She read every report he sent, every story, every line item. She remembered her mother coming home with aching feet, complaining about managers who cared more about linen counts than human beings. She thought about how she had promised herself she would be a different kind of leader, and she realized that somewhere along the way, She had lost control of her own creation. The system she'd built had grown teeth. Now, she had to decide whether she was brave enough to pull them out. What you discovered next made everything even worse. Because as Daniel followed the trail higher, he realized something chilling. This wasn't just about one CFO cutting corners. It was bigger. He found emails where Andrew bragged to regional managers about streamlining operations by getting rid of emotion-driven staff. He saw memos praising uncompromising efficiency, with bonuses attached to departments that cut the most non-essential expenditures. And in the corner of one report, he saw a note that made his blood run cold. Flag: concerns raised by D. Ortega. Potential threat to alignment. Recommend removal under restructuring phase 3. So it had never been about performance. It had always been about getting rid of anyone who might question the numbers. He brought this to Vanessa. When she saw that note, her jaw clenched. "He put that in writing?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said. He was arrogant enough to assume no one would ever read it. She looked at him sharply. "If I confront him with this, he'll deny everything. He'll say you've misinterpreted. He'll accuse you of trying to sabotage him after he disciplined you." "Then don't just confront him," Daniel replied. "Expose him." "How?" "Let him expose himself," Daniel said. And that was how their strategy began. They devised a plan. Vanessa would call a leadership summit. All department heads, board members, senior executives. The official agenda: aligning our values with our vision, a new era for the Colton Group. The real agenda: confronting the system that had been quietly rotting her company from the inside. Daniel would be there, not as a convenient staff member, as a witness. In the days leading up to the summit, Andrew strutted through the hotel like a king surveying his kingdom. He didn't know what was coming. He thought he'd won. He even approached Daniel in the lobby. "Ah, Mr. Ortega," he said smoothly. "I heard you had a little meeting upstairs recently." Daniel kept his face neutral. "Yes, sir." "I trust you were reminded of your place in the hierarchy," Andrew said. Daniel thought of Vanessa's offer, of the hand she had extended, of the quiet way she had said, "Help me fix my company." "Yes," Daniel said evenly. "I was." "Good," Andrew said, clapping his shoulder. "Loyalty is everything in a company like this." As he walked away, Daniel exhaled slowly. If only he knew. The day of the summit arrived. The ballroom had been transformed into a sleek conference space, with rows of chairs, a large stage, and a massive screen displaying the Colton Group logo. Board members flew in. Senior executives arrived in designer suits, holding leather folders and expensive pens. Daniel stood at the back, feeling out of place in his perfectly ironed but clearly cheaper suit. "You okay?" Vanessa murmured as she passed him. "Not at all," he admitted. "Good," she said. "That means you're paying attention." She took the stage as everyone settled. "Good morning," she said into the microphone. Her voice was calm, confident, the voice everyone recognized from interviews and shareholder calls. "Today," she continued, "we're here to talk about the future of the Colton Group. But before we talk about where we're going, we need to talk about what we've become." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. She clicked a button. The screen behind her changed. Not to a growth chart. Not to a glossy promotional video. To a testimonial. A quote from a guest about a concierge who had saved our family vacation by going above and beyond. Signed, "Forever grateful, the Marshall family." "That," Vanessa said, pointing to the screen, "is how we built this empire. On people who cared more about our guests than our numbers." Another click. Now the screen showed a bleak internal memo snippet. "Reduce compensation approvals by 40% this quarter. Reclassify as needed." "Somewhere along the way," she said, "we started caring more about this." A memo rose. From a table near the front, Andrew sat, watching her with a cool expression. "I've always said we are a values-driven company," she continued. "That we don't sacrifice integrity for margin. That we don't punish employees for doing the right thing." She paused. "I'm here today to admit that somewhere in my own organization, that promise has been broken." The room went still. She clicked again. Now internal logs appeared. Side-by-side comparisons of original guest compensation records and altered classifications. Some of you might be seeing these for the first time, she said. I have someone to thank for helping me uncover them. Her eyes flicked to Daniel at the back of the room. This is Daniel Ortega, she said, her voice carrying clearly. Many of you have walked past him in the lobby. Most of you probably never learned his name. Heads turned. Daniel felt his face heat. He's a single father, she continued, who risked his job to tell the truth about what was happening one level below this room. Andrew's gaze sharpened. Daniel was instructed by our CFO to alter records after the fact, Vanessa said. He refused. A ripple went through the crowd. Andrew stood up. Vanessa, with respect, this is not the appropriate forum. It is exactly the appropriate forum, she cut in, her voice steel. Sit down, Andrew. He froze. Slowly, he sat at A. She clicked again. Emails appeared on the screen. Real ones. From Andrew. Reclassify these comps. Flag resistant staff for restructuring. Too much emotional decision-making at the floor level. We need compliant people, not heroes. Compliance, Vanessa said, reading the words aloud. Not heroes. She turned to face the room fully. This is how some of our leaders have begun to see our staff. Not as human beings. Not as the reason we exist. But as tools. Replaceable. Disposable. Her gaze swept the room. And when one of them refused to compromise his integrity, what was the suggested solution? She clicked again. On the screen appeared the line. Recommend removal under restructuring phase 3. Remove him, she said. Not because he was incompetent. Not because he was cruel to our guests. Because he didn't want to lie on a spreadsheet. The room was dead silent. Andrew's face flushed. These emails are taken out of context, he said. This is standard optimization language. He's twisting it to make me look. I didn't write those emails, she said sharply. You did. She turned to Daniel. Daniel, would you join me up here for a moment? Every instinct in him screamed to say no. To run. To dissipate. But somewhere deep inside, something else spoke louder. Emily's voice. Raise her honest. He walked slowly down the aisle, feeling 100 eyes on him. Vanessa handed him the microphone. Tell them, she said, in your own words. His hand shook slightly as he took the mic. I'm not good at speeches, he said quietly. A few people chuckled nervously. I'm just a dad, he continued. A concierge. I stand at the door. I carry bags. I recommend restaurants. I fix problems when someone's room isn't what they expected. He looked around. I don't know much about stocks or margins, he admitted. But I know what it feels like when your child is sick and you're scared. I know what it feels like when you save up all year for a vacation and it gets ruined by something broken, and you feel like nobody cares. He glanced at Andrew, then back at the crowd. And I know what it feels like to be asked to pretend those moments don't matter as much as saving a few dollars. He took a shaky breath. When Mr. Locke asked me to change the records, he said, he wasn't asking for efficiency. He was asking me to lie. To make it look like we were being less generous so the numbers would make him look better to people in this room. A few board members shifted, frowning. And when I said no, Daniel continued, I knew I might lose my job. I did it anyway. Not because I'm brave. I'm not. I was terrified. But because my wife asked me, before she died, to raise our daughter knowing I'm a good man. And I couldn't look my little girl in the eyes if I started selling my integrity for a paycheck. He swallowed hard. I'm not here to bring anyone down, he said quietly. I'm here because I still believe in what this company says it is. The company that took a chance on me when I was a broken widower just trying to survive. The company whose logo my daughter draws with a big heart over it. If this company really is what we say, then we can't punish people for doing the right thing. We can't reward leaders who hide the cost of kindness. He handed the microphone back to Vanessa, his eyes shining. Thank you, she said softly. She turned back to the crowd. Some of you might be thinking, this is dramatic. This is unnecessary. Some of you might even be angry at me for airing this in public. Her gaze hardened. Good, she said, because you should be angry. Not at him, at what we've allowed our culture to become. She turned to Andrew. Andrew, she said clearly, do you deny sending these emails? He straightened his tie. I admit my language could have been misinterpreted, he said carefully. But everything I've done has been in the interest of protecting the company's financial health. That is my job. Your job, she said, is to protect our integrity, too. And in that, you have failed. A tremor went through the room. For months, she continued, we've seen ballooning executive bonuses tied to cost-cutting that targeted the people who could least afford it. We've quietly reshuffled losses to hide the true cost of service. We've sent a message to staff that if they stand up for what's right, they'll be removed. She turned fully to him. As of this moment, she said, your employment with the Colton Group is terminated. Gasps. Murmurs. Andrew's face went white. You can't be serious, he said. You're making a mistake. The board, she said coldly, entrusted me to lead this company, not to gut it from the inside for the sake of short-term margins. If they disagree with me, they can remove me. But I will not stand here and keep someone in power who punishes honesty and rewards manipulation. Security, who had been standing quietly near the doors, stepped forward. Andrew looked around the room, waiting for someone to defend him. No one did. As he was escorted out, his confident stride had turned into a stiff, jerky march. And just like that, the man who had called Daniel a liability was the one being removed. Karma doesn't always look like a movie scene, but sometimes it comes pretty close. The official fallout took weeks. Internal audits, board reviews, policy overhauls. Some people left quietly, some were reassigned. But something else happened, too. For the first time, staff at the Colton Grant felt like someone at the top was actually listening. Vanessa launched what she called the Integrity Initiative. Anonymous reporting channels. New training modules that prioritized ethical decision-making. Town halls where staff could ask her questions directly. At the first town hall, a housekeeper raised her hand nervously. Is it true? You almost fired Daniel, she asked. Vanessa didn't dodge. Yes, she said. I tested him. In a way that I'm not proud of. I put him in a position no parent should be put in. But because of that test, I saw who he really was. And because of who he is, we're here now, having this conversation. She turned to Daniel, who was standing off to the side. For what it's worth, she said in front of everyone, I'm sorry I used your fear as a tool. You deserved better than that. Your daughter deserved better than that. His chest tightened. Thank you, he said quietly. Staff started looking at him differently after that. Not just as the concierge guy. As the man who had looked power in the eye and told the truth. Months passed. Life didn't magically become perfect. Bills still arrived. Mia still needed her insulin. Work was still work. But some things were undeniably different. Daniel's role evolved. He became the Guest and Staff Experience Integrity Officer, a title that sounded ridiculous to him at first. I feel like a superhero with a boring cape, he joked to Mia. She beamed. You are a superhero, she insisted. You saved your hotel. He laughed, but a part of him believed her. Just a little. He spent his days listening. To guests. To staff. To people who were brave enough to say, this feels wrong. Even when it was uncomfortable. And upstairs, in her glass office, Vanessa changed too. She still cared about margins. You don't stay a billionaire by ignoring math. But she started measuring something else alongside them. Stories. She asked for more guest letters. More staff feedback. She visited the lobby more often. Not just to sweep through on her way to an event, but to stand quietly in a corner and watch. One day, she saw Daniel kneeling down to talk to a little boy who had dropped his ice cream. Daniel handed the boy a fresh cone, then whispered to his parents, Don't worry, this one's on us. The parents looked relieved. The boy grinned. Vanessa smiled. That, not the stock ticker, was why she had built all of this. As for Andrew, he didn't go to jail. This isn't that kind of story. He did face a formal investigation, there. When other companies called Vanessa for references, she didn't lie. He's brilliant with numbers, she said. But if you hire him, what's your culture? He believes profit is the only thing that matters. He eventually found work elsewhere. Smaller company, less power. And every time he looked at the Colton Grand on the news, with its new integrity initiative praised in business magazines, he knew he'd miscalculated. He hadn't just underestimated Vanessa. He'd underestimated the single dad he'd called a threat to alignment. A year later, Daniel stood in a very different kind of room. It wasn't a ballroom or CEO office. It was a school gym decorated with paper stars and glittery cardboard signs. "Daddy, over here." Mia waved from a small stage, wearing a homemade costume for the school's future May presentation. Each child had to come dressed as who they wanted to be when they grew up. Some were doctors. Some were athletes. Some were YouTube stars. Mia stood proudly in a navy blazer with a little hand-drawn badge that said GM, General Manager. Daniel sat in the front row, confused and smiling. When it was her turn, she stepped up to the microphone. "When I grow up," she said proudly, "I want to run a hotel. Like my dad." A gentle laugh rippled through the parents. "Because my dad told the truth even when it was scary," she continued, voice wobbling a little. "And he saved his hotel. And a billionaire lady listened to him. And that's why I want to be a boss who listens." Daniel's vision blurred. In the back of the gym, trying not to draw attention, Vanessa stood by the door. She'd slipped in quietly at his invitation. When Mia said a billionaire lady, Vanessa's lips curved. After the event, Mia ran to her father. "You were amazing," he said, scooping her up. Vanessa approached, a little awkward out of her usual environment. "Hi, Mia," she said. "You did a wonderful job." Mia's eyes widened. "Daddy, it's her," she whispered loudly. "The hotel superhero." Vanessa laughed, something warm and genuine. "I'm no superhero," she said. "Your dad is." Mia shook her head vigorously. "You both are," she said decisively. "You fix things together." The three of them stood there, for a moment, in the noisy gym full of kids and parents and paper stars. Not billionaire and employee. Not power and vulnerability. Just people. People who had been changed by a single decision. One man, sitting in a glass office, choosing not to trade his integrity for survival. One woman, sitting across from him, choosing to listen instead of crush him. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was real. Looking back, Daniel would often think about that day in the CEO's office. The day she looked at him and said, "You're fired." The day his whole body went cold. The day he thought he was about to lose everything. And he'd realized something. That was the day he actually found himself. Because in that moment, stripped of security, forced to choose between fear and truth, he chose truth. And that choice was the one that changed everything. Not just his job. Not just his bank account. His daughter's future. His boss's leadership. His company's culture. All of it shifted. Right there. In the crack between "I'm terrified" and "I'm still going to do the right thing." So, if you're watching this right now, and you've ever felt like you had to choose between your values and your survival, know this. You're not alone. The world will tell you that integrity is a luxury. That honesty is for people who can afford to lose. That you should do whatever it takes to keep your job, your status, your image. But sometimes, the very thing you're most afraid to lose is exactly what your honesty will protect in the long run. No, it doesn't always lead to a billionaire changing her mind. No, it doesn't always get you a promotion or a title with the word officer in it. But it does something even more important. It lets you look at the person in the mirror, and the little eyes watching you from across the room, and say, "I didn't sell who I am." And if you've ever felt small in a big system, like a single dad in a tower owned by a billionaire, remember Daniel. Remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is also the simplest. "No, I won't lie." Because you never know who's listening. You never know whose heart might be cracked open by your courage. And you never know when the words you speak in your worst moment might be the words that change everything. If you believe that integrity matters more than money. If you believe that people should never be punished for doing the right thing. If you've ever had to make a hard choice like Daniel, let me know in the comments. Tell your story. You never know who might need to hear it. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who quietly does the right thing even when no one's watching, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this video with them. And if you want more powerful, emotional stories like this, about real choices, real courage, and real hearts, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest truths.